Well, thanks, Oliver, very much for joining me on the podcast. It's great to finally book this in and get to chat to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's a privilege.
So, there's so many places we could start, um, but I wanted to start with something that came up in my research I was doing.
All right.
It's a little bit random, but that's to ask you
I'm
how a
I'm already a
child,
bit afraid.
yeah, 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 and it's to ask how a childhood carnival costume perhaps hinted towards your path that you find yourself on today, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think I know what you refer to. Yeah. Um, yeah, when I was, I think it must have been like 4 or 5 years old. In Germany, we have this tradition in February. I think it's in February. We have this carnival, basically this culture event where we dress up children and we just have the times of our lives. And most of the children, they want to be a firefighter, an astronaut, a policeman. And I wanted to be a sea elephant. um, because yeah, since a young age, I just adore nature and I love all kind of species. And I told my mom, yeah, I want to be a sea elephant. For some reason, I was like mesmerized by their size, by their very individual look. And I told her like, no, I want to be a sea elephant. And at first, she didn't take it serious, but then she really saw that I was serious and I didn't want to be a ninja or anything else. And so she actually started searching. And for context, I was born in the 90s, so 91 to be precise. So 95, 96, there were no costumes of sea elephants. So she got into it. She made it a DIY project, and she actually pulled it off. And looks, I think, on the picture, maybe we can share it at a later moment. I think she did actually quite a good job, and that's definitely a story that sometimes I would like just to tell because it shows really what a bizarre child I maybe was already back then, and how big my love for nature was back then, and how it's just been like since then. Just yeah, just got even more intense with the years. Yeah.
And I guess that link to nature has stayed with you the whole time growing up. And I know you kind of maybe went away in terms of your career and stuff like that from focusing on nature-based problems and solving them. But again, in my research that I was doing on you, I noticed another kind of key story or milestone, I guess, in your life and how it led to what you're working on today, which I'd also like to dive into if you'd let me. And that was
Mhm.
a story around sleeping next to lions and kind of how that led to the creation of the project and the mission that you're working on today.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing that I would like to say there is just like what you just mentioned. For example, I was always connected to nature, but I was struggling like anybody else with
Mm.
living up to the person that I wanted to become and the person that I wanted to be and the things that I'm passionate about. I was as insecure as anybody else, especially like in high school. I didn't show people that I was loving in nature. I was laying like when I was coming home, I was laying in grass, I was looking up in the sky. There I could be myself. But I was not in high school. I was not telling people, hey, like back then I was a sea elephant or how cool our wildebeest are. I was hiding myself as well. So like I went through the different stages as well. My first career were also not in biodiversity or in that field because at first I thought like I need to go into other industries and so on. So I was hiding or like not standing up for myself and who I really wanted to be and what I really care about also for a long time. And it was like ups and downs and ups and downs. So just about that, because sometimes we create this unrealistic, like, oh, this person was always like that. And no, like as anybody else, a big, big denier of my passion and what I really stand for. And the second part, so regarding the lines, yeah, funny story. I had the great privilege in my studies to visit a lot of countries. So I was living in Australia, I was living in France, in Turkey, in Iceland, in South Africa. And when I was like living in South Africa, I thought, coming also from a bit of a dark place, but I thought to myself, like, I'm not sure how much of the wilderness we will still have in the future. So I shouldn't wait to explore the different countries of Africa and just like push it like, you do that when you're 50 or 60, because I'm literally, sometimes I'm still afraid that it might not going to be there. So I told myself, okay, no, take a loan and go on an Africa trip and see it while it's still there. Very selfish, but just to explore it and see for myself the incredible nature that I was always dreaming of when I was a child. And yeah, we ended up in Botswana in the Chobe National Park. And the cool thing in Botswana is, first, they don't have fences around the park. So all the animals, the elephants, lions, and so on, they walk around in the country. It's not like a zoo, it's nothing like that. So no fences. Also no fences inside the national park. So when you are camping, we were camping as a group there, there's also no fence in the camp. So basically what they did is, like, the sun was setting, and we were lucky to find a pride of lions that were just munching on a giraffe that they had like laid. And the guy was saying like, okay, guys, yeah, I know, beautiful sights, sunset in Africa, lions, you have it all. But unfortunately, we need to get to camp because it's getting dark. He basically drives like 200, 300 meters around the bush and says like, yeah, guys, that's our camp for the night. It was literally just like a fire and like our 10 tents or something around that fire, nothing else, and so on. 200, 300 meters from the lions. And we were like, yeah, we're not getting out of that Jeep. You can, but we will stay here. And literally, like, for like 2 or 3 minutes, people were staying on there because, I'm originally from Germany. The most dangerous animal that we have, like, we have like a couple of wolves coming back. We have like, but that's it. And like such a low number, you would never see a wolf.
Yeah, an aggressive dog or something. Probably the
Yeah,
most scary
aggressive.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the most dangerous as it gets. And so we then decided, okay, they know what they're doing, so we're just gonna go with it, and had the most amazing night. But like sooner or later, I needed to go on toilet, and the toilet was a bush toilet. So it was like not far, like 10, 15, 20 meters from the fireplace. But those 10, 50 meters, if it's dark, and you know that they're lions,
Those instincts start to kick in, I guess.
exactly the instincts and the senses that I grew up in Berlin, and I was living in Sydney, I was living in Paris, Istanbul, and so your senses, they just get numb because like of the noises. Like, you don't want to smell most things in big cities and so on. So, and in that moment, you start to use your smell, you start to use your ears, you start to use like all your senses come alive, and you're like, whoosh. That's how it feels like to be really alive. And I was in that moment, the first spark of like the company that I'm currently creating, Wildya, was back in that moment, because I was like, how cool would it be to give people in cities or people that don't have this privilege to get a taste of that. Of course, you can't transport it 100%, but the sense of this, like how it is to feel alive and how to use the senses that we got numb and so on. And how can we, maybe not everybody can go to Botswana, and not everybody should go to Botswana, because if everybody would go to Botswana, we wouldn't have, that pristine nature there anymore. But how can we still transport that? Because I strongly believe if we transport that feeling, we wouldn't do what we currently do in wrecking up this planet so much. So yeah, that's a bit like about Botswana and sleeping next to lions. Yeah.
So to take that leap from sleeping next to lions to going ahead and creating Wildya as a business and as a mission, what did that look like? Was it, I imagine it wasn't a wake up in the morning, right, back on a plane, this is it. I imagine there was a little journey to get to that point as well.
Yeah, a journey indeed. I always explain it from it's basically two roads that just like sooner or later they basically just cross, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's the path. But then as soon as those crossed, you still went in like all different directions. It was not like, oh, just going straight and going upwards. No, it was then still going cross. So the first, basically the two roads, maybe to start there, always passionate about nature, always looking for ways, how can we actually preserve what is left, and how can we actually do more, how can we restore, how can we rewild? Because like just keeping the status quo doesn't go enough for me. Like we destroyed so much. I think we need to do some redemption, and we need to help nature to recover. So that's basically the one road leading me from like sea elephant to high school, to deciding I wanted to study business and not biology or zoology, because I had the strong belief like businesses are the reason why we are in this mess. So businesses can also be the reason to get out of it, or at least the techniques that they're using, like marketing, storytelling, and so on, to get out of this mess. So always strong feeling about nature. And the second road, like mental health. When I was younger, my parents, they got separated. And for a long time, I thought it didn't have any impact on me. But actually, as a child, I had to see a children's psychologist. And I had some sort, probably closest to OCD. So I needed to see them, and actually helped me a lot to overcome that. And I also have ADHD. So from a young age, I was very much exposed to like how important mental well-being is, and how important neuroscience on your entire happiness is, and how much different a life can look like if that is not going in the right direction that you want to, and if you feel sometimes a bit like prisoned by your own mind. So I was exposed to this thing as well, and so I was like, sooner or later they just like started a bit like to merge. To be really concrete, there were like a couple of things. So yeah, we talked about the lions. That's where it sparked first. The second time where this really like bigger spark came, for example, I was participating in a hackathon. And I don't know what you know about hackathons, but basically for 48 hours, you have like the challenge, solve something X. And there are hackathons, but quite often they're only like not climate related at all, but there are some that are climate related, but biodiversity couldn't find any. So I participated in the climate one, and realized back then is no, climate is very important, and it also helps biodiversity, but there's almost nobody talking about biodiversity. There's almost no action, almost no funding going into biodiversity. I really want to do biodiversity. So that was a second aha moment where I was like, nah, it really needs to be in that direction. And that was another one. And then came COVID, like, and it hit me like a lot of other people. We were locked up from one to the other second. And there again, like those two roads that really, really came together, because on one side, I realized I always considered myself a nature lover, but I reflected on my life and it was just not true. I always considered myself, but just because you imagine that you're a nature lover doesn't make you actually one. Actions do. So actions, and I don't mean like you need to become a greater. I mean it as in like I was not consuming any content about this. I was not watching documentaries. I was not reading about it. My entire friend circle, there was nobody I could, geek out about lions, sea elephants, biodiversity loss, how we can turn it around. Nobody. And my work was not related to biodiversity. So there was nothing in my life that indicated that I am a nature lover. At the same time, I knew that the thing that made me the most happy is somehow trying to have an impact in a positive way on nature. So it was just not, my life was just not reflecting that. So the one road came together, and I started to invest much of this kind of free time that we had into like exploring more what's going wrong and so on. And then the second road came together, where I was realizing a lot of people that were having a very hard time, because basically you're locked up from one to the other second, no social context and so on. But I was doing like quite fine. And I realized that was due to all the shit that I was already going. Can I say shit?
Yeah.
All the stuff I was going through when I was a child, and all the things that I went through like while growing up. And in the end, it just like prepared me to be like a bit more steady and have like a head start for other people. And I was like, hey, I would love to help other people. And so sooner or later, those two things came together, where I was like, okay, what is the root issue of biodiversity loss? And for me, in my reflection, I don't say it's the reflection for everybody. In my reflection, it was like, I think it's because we are disconnected from nature. And our cities, nothing reflects nature. Most of our people live in cities, and we just got disconnected. And because we have this disconnection, we don't care about it. And because we don't care about this, it's easy to destroy. So I was like, okay, how can we create that reconnection? And in a not so spiritual, hippie way, because that already exists. And apparently it didn't work for the broad amount of people. And I thought like, hey, let's stay with that thought. and like try to find something. And then at the same time, I was like, I would love to help people with their mental health and especially eco-anxiety, because that was something that we're probably going to talk a bit like later on the podcast, but that was something that was basically my fuel for like years. And I thought like, hey, I would love to help people there. And then I was like, okay, let's be pragmatic about this. And biodiversity, if people would care about biodiversity, we wouldn't be in that mess. So they clearly don't care about that. So, okay, you can try to fight it as much as possible, but let's just like take it pragmatically. Let's try to find something that people feel strongly about and that they care strongly about, and that is really a pain point for them right now, because only that is something that they really care about, and that's something that they tackle. And I was like, mental health. Mental health is something we all challenged by. It's something that we will always have to go through. Like your life never goes straight, you know, it's always goes in circles and up and downs. And so you need mental fitness. And I was like, okay, if I have to sell something in this business context, then why not selling to help people? And in that moment where we help people, maybe we can introduce nature as a good side gig that is actually helping us. And at the same time, we can then use that money to protect and restore nature. And so that led me a bit like to this. And I'm going to shut up a bit because I don't want to have like too much of a monologue. Yeah.
No, it's
So
good.
that's where they came together. Yeah.
I think it's really fascinating to hear that story of how different paths finally align and everything suddenly makes sense, these different interests. I'm a big advocate for jack of all trades, we call them. I don't know if that's that translates to German, but I know that when I was younger, there was always a push from very early on to specialize, to find your passion, and some kids did early on. They knew they wanted to be a doctor, or they knew they wanted to be a footballer or whatever it was, and they had that passion, and some of them realized that dream, and maybe some didn't, and now they're lost kind of figuring out, oh, what's my passion now if I can't follow that. And I've always been a big fan of spreading yourself a bit thinner, following various passions, and then, as you said, eventually you can figure out a way for a couple of those things to align, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the top 5% or higher of people that are interested in those things combined. And I think this is why we've struck a chord connecting, is that we both share that that idea that marketing and business is a way to unlock more finance into nature restoration, into biodiversity. They don't have to be always fighting with each other. There can be a way to use storytelling in a compelling way to bring people on the journey.
Yeah. No, and entirely. And what you just said, for example, like we only have to look into nature, you know, and nature also, like everything has its place, you know, and so people with general ideas that just want to dip dive into a certain field and then just like get a general scope of it and how it can maybe be used in a broader picture, they have a place. And also the people that really specialize, that really hardcore, know exactly what they want to do, you know, and they exactly know, for example, sometimes in ecology, some people like they dive into really a species and to really like sometimes even subspecies and so on, and they just like they study their entire life this like species, and that's just incredible.
Yeah,
doesn't mean like I have to do it, but I think it's awesome that other people do it. So yeah, we sometimes to celebrate one or the other, where we have to just look into nature and just see like, hey, all have like a value. Yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah. I'm always jealous of people that have found, like you say, a really specific subspecies that they dedicate their entire lives to, and just find that super fascinating. But I don't think I would ever be one of those people. I just wander off. I'm the opposite. I'll just wander in various different directions. My problem is trying to find focus on something for long enough to actually make meaningful progress, rather than than focusing on one thing too much. But I found it served me quite well up until now, and it sounds like it served you well in terms of finally kind of combining those interests and finding this mission with Wildya. So I just wanted to dig a little bit more into the vision, the mission for the app that you're creating, and kind of a little bit more detail how you see it ideally kind of working as you build it out. What is the grand mission for the project, for the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. One thing that I'd just like to share before, like I think focus is something that is very tricky nowadays. And
Oh yeah.
that's for all the listeners. If you manage to figure that one out, that will serve you immensely, because you can do everything nowadays in this world. And even, I mean, we're talking now about biodiversity issue. Even within that, there's so many things that you can do and so on. And so focusing and hitting there the right sweet spot between, on one side, to committing to something and really see also where it goes, while at the same time be open to see like, okay, how can we collaborate and so on. That is a very tricky balance that I also like didn't manage yet perfectly. So focus just before we dive in.
In today's world, very difficult indeed. So many
very, very well. But if you nail that one, very important skill set for any ecopreneur that is out there. Yeah, worth it to study that part of it. So with Wildya, so in general, just for people that listen and never came across us, we are basically creating a mental fitness app that helps people to transform their eco-anxiety into action. We develop courses that are around like 15 minutes, and that help people basically to develop more self-confidence, to learn how to deal with grief. And for example, when they read this kind of horrible news that we're often reflected with, that they're not just like left alone, but that they actually have a place where they can work a bit on their mental health and get like exposure to what is happening with our brain, so neuroscience, but also like techniques from psychology, frameworks that help other people and so on. And what we then do is what I teased a bit before, we take 15% from the revenue that we make, and we actually pay nature. So we protect and restore nature. We have a partner. And the cool thing with our partner is we can actually show the positive impact that we have on nature. So we show it back to the user so that the user can see like, hey, I'm not only working on my mental health and I'm doing something for me, something selfish, but actually I also have a positive impact. And I don't need to do anything. I don't need to do research. I don't need to check if it's legit. I don't need to waste my time if I'm not into it. No, it's just like you basically just show up and you do your thing, and you invest in yourself, and at the same time you invest automatically into nature without ever moving a finger, because we decide to pay nature. So where we want to go, what's in terms of the vision and the mission. So in terms of the vision, we see like a world full of wildlife and happy people. So that's like what we are constantly trying to build towards. So that would be awesome. I think they also go together. I think if we create actually a world full of wildlife, we will have happy people, because we have more exposure to nature. And there's good, like, I mean, there's plenty of research out there. I'm not going to bore you with that, but that proves that nature has like positive mental health impact. So we will actually have happy people. And I doubt that we will have happy people if we eliminate all nature. There's plenty of research findings that show us that we can't even survive without nature, without biodiversity. So also not going to go into that, but yeah, that's basically the vision. And in terms of like mission, how we really get there, for us, it's really about like, what I teased a bit before, how can we reconnect people with nature, but in new ways and cool ways, so that it's not just like pushing them off. How can we get more people engaged in a natural way that aligns with them? So, and that I think is the vehicle that we're using for that is like mental fitness, mental health, and combining that with nature, but very, very mainstream. I'm always like, because like I get challenged by it and people have other ideas. But for me, it is on purpose that we want to attract like a lot of people from the mainstream, because if so many people would care and do daily actions, we wouldn't be in that mess. We need to increase the amount of people that care, because if the amount of people increases that care and that actually change their lifestyle, then we will get there. But right now we're not. And so, and the last thing is, just because for some people like vision, mission, these are all like fluffy business terms. So one thing that I did that helped me a lot is setting a goal, because a goal makes it very, very precise and very scary. And so our goal is we want to protect 1% of this planet by 2030 by helping millions of people. So super, super concrete, freaking me out. scary as hell. I wrote the number down in square meters. I think it's five 5.1 trillion,
Wow.
and it scares the shit out of me. But
Yes.
it's basically, we were talking just about focus, it making all the decisions for me, because I know that I can't make something small. I know that I have to use technology because only technology can scale so much. I know. So it makes also a lot of decisions for you. So in terms of focus, a goal, a precise goal, can really help you to guide you a bit, also not just the vision, but helping you like the mission and then the goal. They help you again to just make sure a North Star, you can still walk towards the North Star, but you can still walk, like quite off. So some other things are needed to keep you as like on the best line, let's say, towards that North Star. And I think a goal, a measurable goal that you can hold yourself accountable, I think that is a good one to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've struggled in the past with setting too many short-term goals, and you always realize that you get frustrated because you never quite accomplish what you want to within a short time. But then you look back in 5-10 years and you go, wow, look at what I've accomplished over that time. I think we're very good at setting short-term goals, but we're better at looking towards long-term goals. So I think it's a big goal, and I really hope you get there. But yeah, I can understand why it gives you some some nervousness and palpitations. But it's you got to aim big. You got to aim big.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about not focusing on people that, the small group, the ones that maybe already have a connection. You've got to focus on the wider audience, and it's a difficult one, I guess, because from a business point of view, more and more people are saying, don't try and be the Amazon model. You try and focus on the smallest viable audience, the ones that are passionate. So I'm interested to get your thoughts on that, and maybe how you're approaching that challenge, because you're completely right. This type of solution needs to be for everyone, and it needs to reach people that are probably the hardest to reach, which goes against the path of least resistance that maybe a marketing textbook these days would tell you. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because you've set yourself a very bold challenge.
No, I mean, I still also study business. I think my passion for business is as big as for biodiversity. I find it like where other people, they puzzle or they draw or they meet friends, is like, I have a very big passion for businesses. I find it very fascinating, like how things are working and how to make them work. For me, that is like a puzzle. So like, it's literally like, also like I consume a lot of content about that. And so what I would say is I agree. And that's also where we're going to start, is like, that is the goal. And we want to be mass approachable, but I agree. Try to focus as narrowly as possible to solving something. And it doesn't need to be scalable right away, but be really, really precise on like who you're trying to create that for. And that was something that I thought like, oh no, we can just like fling it and people will be drawn to it. Now I realized as well, it needs to be very, very precise, because most of us that are starting the ecopreneur journey, they don't have tons of money. So you don't have marketing budget like Coca-Cola, Apple and Co. So you need to be very precise in your communication. And you can only do that if you have a certain persona in mind. And that's for us where we thought like, okay, it has to be people with eco-anxiety, because first, they clearly are struggling when it comes to mental health. And secondly, there's a good chance that they care about nature. And so we were like, okay, let's focus on that, because I also don't feel bad about to actually tackling that area of mental health, because I experienced it my entire life. So I don't have like imposter syndrome. Yes, of course, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't feel, like that great. But at the same time, I know what worked for me, and I got people on board that are helping in that regard, in that field. And so I was like, my entire life was basically really dominated by this eco-anxiety. So let's start there. And eco-anxiety, that's also the thing. I mean, we have very unclear statistics about this. We know that in a young population, it is a massive group of people. So there's even some statistic that say up to like 70 80% of people below like 25 are afraid about the futures and the uncertainty and everything. So it seems to be, especially for younger generation, it will definitely be a big problem. So if you're talking about like future markets or like mainstream, that is already like an indicator that in the future, it unfortunately will be mainstream, because if we don't do something about it ASAP, unfortunately, this fear won't go away. But we also know, and especially that's where we want to focus with Wildya, we actually want to focus on those people, and that's where we don't see that much research, that are actually older. So we want to actually attract people that are from 25 to 45 in that age group, because those are the people that are currently making this decision or will make the decision in the very near future. And for all those listeners, they probably know tons of things about climate and biodiversity, so I don't need to re-emphasize, but we don't have that much time. So I was like, okay, let's really try to attract those people that will be able to make better decisions for all of us. And so yeah, no, I agree. Focus first on a very specific as you can. Understand what you can really offer, where you can really bring value to people, and then grow from there, because then you have at least always something, a good base to fall back to. There's exceptions to this. So for example, a ChatGPT that immediately works, or something like when Amazon came, of course, but be humble. Like most of the ideas are not like that. So you need to start somewhere. And even actually, as soon as you start to do more research in business, Facebook started on universities, like, Nike started, for example, with running shoes, not with like basketball and all the other stuff. So even the big success stories that you often see, they started with something very small too. So
Yeah,
don't be afraid to focus, niche down, and then go big.
yeah, they look like an overnight success when you
Yeah.
look back, but if you read into the biographies or the stories of some of these big companies, they often started out as something completely different, and they ended up, it would never have predicted where they ended up. So I guess kind of similar to your life journey in terms of being interested in different things and following a kind of winding path to get to the Wildya place where you are now. It's similar with a business journey, isn't it? You're gonna probably look back in 5-10 years time, once you've got to that 1%, and think, oh, wow, like we didn't think that we would get there this way, and these particular things struck a chord with people that perhaps you didn't even realize when you first set out. So
yeah. One of the things that I would just like to share with people that helped me, and that was really like a game changer, especially because you just like referred again to the 1%, is like ambition and expectations are not the same thing. And that was just something, I think I just like heard that like 3 or 4 months ago. And since then I keep on repeating it to people, because it's just like, it's so stuck with me, because it really helped me mentally to get to an entirely new level. And the thing is that I have the ambition to create the 1%. And that is something that I put there, and something that keeps on driving me. It is the carrot in my case. It is also like the what do you say, like the carrot and the whip. Is it the whip or something?
the carrot and the stick.
The carrot and the stick. Yeah, like I don't know. Every country has like the different one. But for me, it's like both ways, because I'm like, sometimes I have days and I'm just like, oh, you stupid. Like, why did you do that to yourself? But it is like the ambition, but then the expectation is very low. The expectation is nobody will care about Wildya. People, like, our product will suck. Like, I mean, it sucks always. The first product that you launch always sucks. So why should it be any different? Who I am and my ambition and my idea, or why I'm doing the things, has nothing to do with the company. So I'm not my company, like the startup that I'm creating, just because it fails or because it's not going in the right direction or fast enough, is not always like you are the failure. Yes, you are a big part, you're the engine, but just because like your app sucks doesn't mean that you suck. You can still come from the right place and with the right intention, and sometimes still things don't figure out, So like having very low expectations in love, that will be super hard, and people won't care, and it will be very tricky to get financing in. It will be very tricky to find people that actually engage with the app. But those two things, they help me like a lot, because it puts like the right it keeps you in the right spectrum of mental health, where you, on one side, you're like, oh, we can do this, but at the same time, just like humble, be like, hey, the vast majority fails already in a normal business fails. So if you're starting an impact business in mental health that people don't talk about enough, in biodiversity that people don't talk enough about, and you're trying something to innovate in terms of the business model, you put a lot of things on yourself. So have the expectation that it will fail, but have the ambition to do, go big.
I like it. That's a really good way to approach it. So in terms of the eco anxiety tips and tricks, kind of what have you found over the years for yourself, kind of developing the app and working on that thinking? What's been the number one thing that you found has helped tackling eco anxiety, and then maybe what things that people said to you really helped them the most?
The biggest bingo that you really get, and it's, sorry, I'm going to say it because it's like super cliche, is action. Like the vast majority of us is often at that stage that I was explaining earlier a bit. Like you think you are that certain person and that you care so much about like things, but then we reflect on our lives and it actually doesn't, our real lives and our actions and our weekly calendar, what like maybe you go to soccer, or we have all the other commitments in your life, and in the end, like there is no nature, or there is no, let's say you're passionate about music, and let's say there's no, you don't listen to music, you don't practice music, you don't, so can you really say that you're really into music? Are you really into nature? I found that doubting, and I was blind to that as well. And so taking action, and even on a micro level, it doesn't mean like, again, Greta, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, all these great people, great. But they also started with very, very tiny steps. So just like do the tiniest possible step. But instead of thinking about it, instead of like, oh, shoot, like I don't know those things, or like, oh, it's going to take me 2 hours to read that, or like, oh, look at that PDF report, or look at I need to then the legal status of the company, or like there's so many problems, and of course there will be tons of problems, but just like start with something super tiny, and it can be just like write down 3 name ideas that you have, or just like write down the idea, or just like something even smaller, but just like start taking action about something that you care. And maybe you're listening to this and you're into biodiversity and that's like your thing, but it can be something entirely different. But find the thing that you care the most about, and then just start tiny steps, but do something. Do something to get you to that person that you want to become, or to help in that on the bigger picture, if it's poverty, if it's climate, if it's empowerment, if it's biodiversity, but do something on a small scale, on a big scale. And that helps immensely. And that's also building a muscle, because you get addicted to it in one of the few times where it's probably positive, because you get this kind of, check. And you get kind of addicted to this, because you realize, it's actually, it's taking one step after another, and it's tiny action that just like accumulate, and longer, and sooner or later you're there. And that helps a lot. So that's also from our interviews that we have, in terms of the research that we see, that's it. And people often think taking action means like you have to go on the streets, or they think like you need to start your own business, or you need to start your own NGO. But don't start there when you're like not there yet. Like go,
because it's paralyzing, right? That's why people don't start things, because you go, oh my god, that's scary, I can't do that, I'll just it's small steps, momentum, right?
So super cliche, sorry if that is not like more insightful, but the thing that most people mention, and the thing that I realized for myself that worked the best, and where I was like blocking myself far too long, because I thought like I don't have the expertise yet, I need more insights, I need to have more working experience. And of course it got me where I am, but something that I would recommend to people to take earlier. And the second thing that most people say is like community. So the second most thing that we really heard is like try to find like-minded people. So if you currently look left and right and your spouse doesn't care about let's just stick with nature, because there's a good chance that your listeners are some sort a bit into nature. If nobody cares in your direct environment around it, try to find people. That can be through LinkedIn, that can be through Instagram, that can be through just asking your friends, like just be, hey, we have like so many cool things that we can do together, but something that I really care about, we can't really share because I have the feeling like you're not really interested in. And I also don't want to force you to be interested in sea elephants and and krills and elephant poo and whatever. But hey, do you maybe know somebody that could be interested in that, you know? So trying to find this kind of community so that you're less alone, that helped me a lot, and that also helped like a lot of other people that we had like conversations with, because in the end, like you feel less alone, and that's is helping.
Yeah, I'm going to put a pin in that community point and come back to that in a minute, because I think that's really interesting and lots to talk about there. But just before we do, I just want to ask, without getting too dark at this point in the podcast, but how optimistic are you? You seem like a very optimistic person to me, Oliver, but and you're working on like this amazing project, and kind of it's very optimistic. But you know, when you talk about this disconnection, this growing disconnection between people and nature, and the increasing urbanization, and therefore that gap increasing, and I always think, God, every generation that goes by where that link is lost, and therefore the parents haven't got that link to teach the children and so on, it feels like it's getting more and more difficult to create that connection again. So how optimistic are you about this, when you think about this stuff, and you can be as honest as you want with that question?
No, I really appreciate it, and I agree with everything you said. It is a very, very challenging time for people like us, and probably a lot of the listeners, because it is really, really hard. Like I even get a bit emotional talking about it, but before coming to this podcast, like literally like in half an hour before I made the mistake, I checked like something on LinkedIn, and there was a really great post about wolves in Germany. And if you don't know about the wolf population in Germany, but they are not big. And the post was also about like in Switzerland, they decided to kill off 70% wolves in the next weeks. And I just saw that before, and that was again like I literally felt like shit like before coming to that podcast, and I was like, yeah, maybe he's going to ask me how I feel, and then I'm going to be straight diving into this really interesting topic of coexistence with predators. Nice one. So when I read things like that, and you see the comment section, and you, on one side, I think I have tons of weaknesses, but one of my strengths, I think, is like I have more than usual empathy, I think, with other people, but also with other species. And so I have really empathy. I don't necessarily need to be a farmer to understand like how tricky it must be right now to be in a situation where the public hates you, or where you can't make ends meet, or like consumers are shifting, you don't get paid enough, and then there's like a wolf coming and everything is a mess. So I see that part. I see also like if you're a worried parent that is worried for their kids, or like if you're a dog owner and you're afraid that maybe your dog's is going attacked. And at the same time, we just know that nature is not like, we just take whatever we think fits us and whatever we like to have. So yes, it's awesome to have the panda bears and the polar bears and the elephants and all the other cute animals, but we don't want wasps, we don't want mosquitoes, we don't want wolves, we don't want, wherever it is convenient for us and wherever we decide, we kind of, that life can exist, and the rest needs to be destroyed. That is something that is just like whoosh, especially like if you feel very strong connected to the natural world and to other species, that is something that really hard to navigate that field. So to answer your question, right now, let's say I see it going not like most other people going in the right direction, because we go with certain movements, the good things that are happening are going at that pace, while at the same time the bad things that we are still doing is still growing exponentially. Like just like take a look from climate. The petrol companies, they made the fossil fuel, they made the best years ever. And so that's just like an indicator that we're still like far from going in the right direction. Yes, we have victories and they are super important. And I celebrate every single person that keeps on daily fighting for against, for example, like the ecocide law that's just like got a bit passed and not really like super passed. And it's like still there's like plenty of hurdles.
Oh God, yeah.
But like or nature restoration law in the EU, or there's things like the supply chain that has to change, or like in the future in 25 companies, at least in the European Union, they need to start to measure their nature impact. So there is plenty of stuff. Or there's things like I was in Bristol the other month, and there was somebody that was talking about putting nature on the board, so that it really becomes a stakeholder. So there's so many cool stuff happening. However, right now, when we look at the really broader society, the speed and with how we develop things, it's just not fast enough, and we're not like changing enough. So what I would say is I have the macro perspective of our human species, and I know how that in total we're going in the right direction, but we are not going fast enough. And that realization, especially if you read all the science, and if you read the climate science, if you read the nature science, that's just like you can do all this kind of calculation in your head, what's going to happen in the next decades. And so that doesn't paint like a really good picture. But that being said, is I am somebody like, okay, what can I do about it? Like, what does it bring if I just like give up? Because if I give up, that will be the same outcome. So I'm somebody like, I need to be positive. I need to show people that it's not just like, let's paint a really negative future and that will motivate people. That can work, but I strongly believe like it is not really balanced. So we mostly show people the future is horrible and this will happen and this will happen and this will happen. And so do something about it. What I think what we need to see more in the public is like a positive future. So something like, hey, wouldn't you like to see actually your kids and yourself like having clean water, breathing air, a stable climate, no food shortage, thriving wildlife. For example, I was just like sitting the other day with my girlfriend on a bench and we were looking to the sea, and there used to be tons of whales in our area. Right now there's none. And how cool would it be if there would be actually whales coming back, if there would be dolphins like at the sunset? And we can create that. We can really help nature to bounce back, and nature is the best. It's like always blows my mind like how fast nature actually can recover if it just gets like some push and some resources allocated to it to protect it, restore it, and rewild it. And so I'm somebody, general outlook from the pragmatic, from the, let's say, science and from the brain part, I would say very dark. From the passion, heart, and let's keep on fighting, very much so, because in the end, that's the only only like this we can still change something. If I give up, it will definitely go in that way. If I don't give up, and if I know 24/7 I do my best to not get into that future, then at least I try everything. So
I think I can relate to that feeling of, I think change happens as a society, as a global society, quite slowly and gradually. If you look back over time, we are moving in a positive direction in terms of so many things, and I do see that, like you said, with changes in legislation and requirements and things like that happening very slowly. But then, as you correctly said, at the same time, the impacts are increasing exponentially. And that's the biggest concern for me, is can we change the way we are, the way we act quick enough to keep up with to act on such an urgent crisis. I just feel like COVID almost gave me hope that we could rally around. It was weird. It was like, we can do this, but it's going to be unfortunate if we have to get to that point with climate or with biodiversity where it's so obvious. I mean, to me, and to many people, the change is obvious. Like you said, the loss of whales on your coastline, or
Mm.
the change in the weather patterns, things like that, it
Mm.
seems obvious, but it's
Yeah.
still not quite affecting
Mm.
lives enough to have that real. And it's a shame if that's where we are as a species. If we need it to get to that point
Yeah.
to really act quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
just too much nudging along at the moment. But I'm still hopeful that things can change, and it's going to require bold
mm,
action. It's
yeah.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens at COP next week, because
Very, very
well,
exciting.
we're
Yeah.
at 28 now,
Yeah.
and every time I'm like, maybe this time
Mm.
someone's going to make so a group of governments are
Mm.
going to come together and make some big statements or something, and you just
Yeah.
think, is it
Yeah.
just going to be another eye roll? We'll wait and
Yeah.
see on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm fully with you. Like, so there's the one thing that I would like to add, because you just mentioned like the COP, is for people that didn't know, for example, now we have like the SDGs, and we have, for example, the 30-30 targets and so
Hmm.
on. There actually have been biodiversity goals before. A lot of people, they don't know about this, but I think it has this Japanese name. Whoever always comes up with those names, but I think Ayachi goals, I think they're called. But basically, they were set up, hope I'm not lying, but something around like 2010 or something. And they were like for 10 years. And basically, we didn't hit any of the goals. Right now, also, like if you look into SDG, Sustainable Development Goals research, you find out that right now we're not on track to hit any of the goals. And even when it comes to the target, we only hit 12% if we continue with that speed right now. And these are like the most prominent
Mm.
marketed goals that really speak for like, hey, how do we define like living on this planet in a good state? Let's say these are SDGs. There are tons of problems with them, but they are giving definitely good indicators and at least starting points. And we had these Ayachi goals, for example. We didn't manage them, and there was no really like big changes happening after them. SDG goals right now, really bold. You don't really see that much happening. So that's why I'm always like, when it comes to governments, I want to stay as much as supportive and so on, but I always tell people like, hey, don't hope for governments. If they come around, awesome, positive, like unexpected positive win, but don't wait for them, because if you wait for them, like again, they there's a high chance that they won't fix it. Love, for example, COVID. I give you totally right in this as well. What people said in our eco anxiety studies is that that gave them actually also some sort of hope.
Mm.
Tragic, tons of tragic events,
Yeah,
but it showed us like what is possible if we collaborate and if we make
exactly.
synergies happening, and that within weeks people can come together and say like, hey, this is bigger than us. And right now we have the same challenges with climate, we have the same challenge with biodiversity. If you want to go further, we have the same challenge with circular economy, with degrowth, with inequality. So we have like tons of challenges, but we can do it if we
Hmm.
want to, because these changes and these challenges are bigger than us. But the challenges don't care. They do not say like, oh yeah, guys, I will leave you. I will leave you a bit alone. I will come in 2050, like, and then we'll be payment date. No, unfortunately not. Like, they come whenever they want to, and they're gonna hit us hard, unfortunately. And we even now we don't have perfect signs what tipping points exactly will happen, and then we can't go back. And so
Mm.
let's rather get our shit together while we can, and it is possible. It's just bold and yeah.
Yeah, we're very good at setting these goals, and then not me. If another alien species in thousands, millions of years that discovers human documentation, they'll be like, they were very good at setting goals and then not achieving them.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting. It made me think
yeah,
about what you were saying earlier about
yeah,
business goals and setting
yeah,
ambitious goals, but then
yeah,
not being worried if you
yeah,
don't, kind of making yourself comfortable with the fact that
yeah,
it's ambitious and you might not get
yeah,
there. And
yeah,
it's almost like governments and companies are taking that same approach, but unfortunately, when it comes to the biodiversity and
for
climate
sure.
crisis,
Yeah,
there needs to be a little bit more
yeah,
consequence for
yeah,
not meeting those goals, right? They're not like
yeah,
a people. I think people are taking that mindset that it's a dream, like someone would have a dream to own a big house or to go
yeah,
travel around the world. It's like, no,
yeah,
they're not a dream. These are serious
yeah,
goals that if we don't hit them, we're in
yeah,
serious trouble. I
yeah.
think I think there needs to be a little bit of a mindset switch there.
when those goals hit, then no, for sure. I think I also there need to be precise, because maybe I didn't do it enough. And is like, if you stop at setting the goals and that's like your expectation, and then you think like, the goals will happen just because you set them, then that's what we unfortunately see often in that arena, is a bit like you make those goals and those bold claims, and then there is a lack of action, at least with there's either pseudo action, so it's literally like they don't take any action at all, or they even take contra action. So they actually, we're not going to talk about subsidizing, but subsidies, like the damaging ones, are much higher than the ones that we actually push in towards nature and how we want to finance it. So just by shifting that already, we will have like a lot of positive that could happen. And so of course, if you start your business and you set your goals, and then you're going to sit down and you say like, see you 2030.
And then you're like,
unfortunately, it's not that easy. But if you really, in the best possible way, every day you show up and you work in whatever information you have right now that makes sense to you, and that you think like, okay, that moves the needle the most, that has the most positive impact in that moment. Because in 5 years back, everybody could say like, this was so clear and whatever. No, but you did it. So no, take action with the best information that you have, and every day show up and try to do better and the most impactful things. And if you don't end up there, then fine. If, for example, I think people wouldn't be as mad as like politicians, world leaders, if we are just not fast enough in research, but we are doing this and we're doing this. We have like carbon capture here, and we put like billions and trillions into that, and at the same time we put trillions into nature restoration. I think people wouldn't be mad if we then still see those effects coming in, But people have this feeling they see those bold claims, then there's no action, and at the same time they have to suffer all the consequences. And so I think that's where they lose people.
Yeah, agreed. So I want to come back to the community point, as I said I would do, and that idea of building communities in a world where it feels like it's easier than ever to reach more people, but then that can create, well, we know it can create arguments, the discourse online, and everyone's familiar with the polarization of views and things like that. And I just wanted to pick up on that and talk about your journey on LinkedIn in particular. Congratulations on becoming a LinkedIn top green voice. Amazing achievement. Just for context, actually, on that, I was looking back through our messages to each other, and I think you messaged me for the first time on LinkedIn probably about 9 months ago, back in March. And I remember at the time, you think you only had a few hundred followers maybe, or you were just starting on that journey, and you've really taken it by storm, and within just 9 months got to being a top green voice. So congratulations on that achievement. It's no mean feat. But I just wanted to dig into that a bit, your feelings around the importance of building communities, whether it's online or in person, and the importance of that in terms of tackling the biodiversity crisis and wider environmental problems that we face.
Thank you, first of all, for the kind words, and for the big question. Before I start anything, I just always want to thank the people that got me there, because one of the things that I have a strong problem with in this nowadays society is always like pretending that this is like a one-man show or a one-woman show, or that the person got there just because they're so great at something. It is not. It's like, it's the support that you get from your family, it's the support that you get from the friends, it's the support that you get from the people that actually consume either the stuff that you post or that connect with you and that help you. It's the nice messages that keep you going. It's like the support also comes from other fields. So for example, me, as you heard now in this podcast, I'm super passionate about nature. So for me, for example, this is like my support, and so if I wouldn't have that, if I wouldn't have nature, and it would be maybe even a more dire state, I wouldn't be able to do that. And I also know, for example, just from selfish reasons, for example, like if we would have a more booming wildlife world, I would be much more productive. I would be much crazier because I would be even happier. I would be even more balanced. I could probably work on some other stuff because the world is wild, and I don't need to work on that. And I could probably like research elephant seals and would be the happiest person just like observing them. But it's not the world that we have right now. And so I think in order to get to the world that whatever you find important, communities is the way to go, because like you can be like one person and you can try to inspire others, and you can be a machine when it comes to putting it into action, but in the end your day has 24 hours. So as long as you always stay a lone fighter, you won't really get far. And especially when it comes to these macro challenges, like who am I to say like I am going to be the person that solves biodiversity crisis, like who am I to say that, so it needs tons and millions and billions of people to really bring the change that we want to see. So communities are crucial, because quite often we think like, yeah, we need to spark this kind of community immediately that is like 500,000 people or 1,000,000 people. But no, it can also be like a community in your local area. It can be just like a group of passionate people, 5 people that clean up beaches. It can be like 10 people that rewild like wildflowers. It can be like, it can have so many different shapes, and community is just like such an important tool, because in the end, as I was saying a bit earlier, we tried for a long time, the people that care about nature, to come with arguments as in like, nature is important, species have a right to live, but it's clearly not working. Because in the end, we humans, we are the ones that make the decisions. We are the ones that are living on this planet. So you need to, I was really blind to this for like a long time. So I don't judge you. Like if you're right now at that space where you still think like, we use that argument, I don't judge you at all. But we need to find the arguments that work for the people, unfortunately, if you like it or not. And so community plays like such a huge role in that. If you can spark inspirational, or if you can just like get people to work together with you, that gets you like so much farther, and so much quicker as well. We were just talking about speed. Yes, you can get quite far alone, and you're really fast alone, but you won't get as far, and especially in the long term, you don't really make the impact that you really want to. And snowball effect is a real thing. So like if you touch like something small, it can be like, just, hey guys, I would like to be a vegetarian now. You don't have to change necessarily, but I just wanted to point it out. So if we go to restaurants, can we please take a look on the menu and think, can be small things, but they will have ripple effects, because sooner or later, actually, let me try that veggie steak or something like that. And then it will have ripple effects. And so our small decisions and the small actions, they really truly matter, and they really add up, and compounding interest, that you have on the finance world. And that is a real thing with community as well. So at the beginning, it's like, oh shit, I need to find like one person that cares like about this. It's going to be super hard, because where do I search? Where do I start? And so on. And then you have 5, and then you have 10, and then like, oh, it's still not going anywhere. We're still at 10. And then you sooner or later maybe have 50 or 100. But then sooner or later, like going from 100 that people share word of mouth, hey, you're doing something cool, you're doing something great. From 100 gets easy. Then you have 1,000. From 1,000 gets much easier to do like 2,000. From there, it gets much easier. 5,000. From there, 10,000. So because we were just talking about LinkedIn, when we started to talk, I was starting to post on LinkedIn in January every single day. And I tried to learn and make every post better, but nothing happened. But almost nothing happened until May. So I was posting for 5 months. And so often we give up like right before that hits. And I had exactly this moment where then people just like, they shared with me the first kind of really positive feedback that I am on the right track, and I continued. And shortly after, the compounding effect was starting. So community, super, super, super crucial. And it just comes usually also more natural to us, because we are social animals, So it's usually, if you have to do some homework, a really great book on that is Belong. We can maybe with Rob, we can maybe put it into the
I'll put it into the show notes.
into the description then. That it was a really great read on that, but yeah, definitely something worth investing and learning more about.
Yeah, we are social animals, and it's harder and harder to find those
Mm.
real connections these days. But I think I've been leaning into LinkedIn again because I gave up obviously with Twitter, with Facebook, these social networks that are anything but kind of, or social media. They became social media, didn't they? And that's what people, I can't remember who it was that I heard on a podcast recently saying that was the turning point. That was when they changed from a social network where it was about connection to social media where it was about advertising and creating or keeping people there and creating arguments and amplifying these polarizing viewpoints. And LinkedIn doesn't seem to have gone quite down that path as much yet. I mean, never say never, but yet you can see that like in certain things in algorithms, it's like if I ever do a post that's slightly more controversial, it tends to get a little bit more interaction. But maybe that's just the nature of people rather than the algorithm itself. But yeah, it's definitely an area where you can find a community a bit easier and an optimistic community in a world where I certainly Twitter, I just used to think that would definitely fill me with eco anxiety. It was just negative. It was very rarely about action. I mean, it's hard to talk about action you're taking in a few characters, right? So whereas LinkedIn is about, it's people posting about usually positive stories, action they're taking, and it just is a much better community and platform. I mean, on that journey then from January to now, I mean, what have you found has been, what tips have you got, I guess, for people listening if they're thinking about trying to build a bit more of a community or a personal brand, to use that term, on LinkedIn? What have you found works and doesn't work?
Before, one of the things, just before we dive really on precise on LinkedIn, I think is find the right one for you, whatever outlet that is. If it's like a newsletter because you love writing, if it's a podcast like Rob is doing now, if it's Instagram, if it's Facebook, whatever, floats your boat. But it is very tricky. That's maybe the first step. It is very tricky to create like a community, create a voice on something that you really don't like. So for example, I really don't get along with Instagram that much. Like for me, I'm not gonna but basically what I experienced was it's a lot of show, but not so much really like about doing. And why in the end chose like LinkedIn was like, again, coming back to that path that we were talking about earlier. If my reflection on the world is that businesses are the force like of destruction and can also be the force of actually regeneration, then I need to be where business leaders are. Business leaders that are taking action in their business on a daily basis, they are on LinkedIn. So, and also like from the social medias, I also have to say like LinkedIn was the algorithm that at least showed me most of the time more relevant stuff than others. So I enjoyed it a bit more. So first tip, be wherever you want to be, but be on a place where you like to be and not like making it like, oh shoot, I need to post something, because I need to be there. That is tip number one, because there will be ups and downs. And if it becomes just like a thing on your to-do list, very, very tricky. Very, very, very tricky. So that's my tip number one. And tip number two, I think, and it's again like a cliche one, but nowadays when you talk about social media, one of the first things that people what's coming into the head is basically fake, like either it's like fake news or it's like fake people and so on. So that comes from something that shows that there's a lot of, and probably the majority of content that is fake. So one of the things that I would recommend is try to just be human, try to be genuine. And I know genuine is also like such a buzzword and like, oh, be authentic, and but just like try to be human. So if you want sooner or later that maybe people like your content, then like people from other people's content and give them actually authentic feedback, or write them like, hey, you've done it good. And maybe if you think like, okay, they could have done something better, then just write them a personal message. Don't go like on berserker on the comments and say like, hey Rob, hey, next time please do that and what. No, but just like be authentic, help other people. If you help other people, there is just like a chance that sooner or later maybe also karma comes back to you. But just be also vulnerable. Don't just like keep everything fake of like everything is perfect, but also share like your challenges, your shortcomings. If you don't know something, I was just like reflecting today on my profile and the things that I post. If I become too much of an echo chamber, and if what I need to do in order to maybe have more discourse and have more of those people that have like a totally different opinion, because that also shows that your content starts to be shown to a broader spectrum of people. As soon as you have hate comments, it's usually also because you're on the right path. Because if you're just like everything is like, you know, I don't know, I always say vanilla, if everything is like just like super straight and super polished, then of course you will never have, but then you also don't have an opinion. So you need to have, I think, a bit of an opinion. You need to share your values. You need to show also, like, if you don't know things, and say like, take them as a learning opportunity. So sometimes maybe you make a mistake in your post and you just say like, hey, awesome, thank you so much for sharing this, I was really not aware of that. And just like, so that's authenticity, being a human. Actually engage with other people on the platform, write other people, to make it more human, to not just like connect, but write them a message, have a phone call, ideally, especially if you're small. Have a phone call. That helps a lot to actually make it more about the human and not just about like, I want, I need, and I take. Give more than you take, and there is often a good chance that you will perform better than others.
That point about broadening the audience and welcoming in that criticism, I think, is an interesting one. I think it is, not that I want to create conflict or anything like that, but it is easy to kind of find yourself it's quite comfortable to remain in that echo chamber. And I was speaking to someone about this recently who has similar path to yourself, has kind of reached about 20,000 followers on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden they said they started to get more and more negative comments because their content was getting shown to more and more groups of people, and it was quite shocking. And they were saying, it's they were almost put off and going back to not wanting to post anymore because they were losing that enthusiasm. And this is you do have to be brave. It's sticking your head above the parapet is I guess the terminology for it, but it's what more and more people need to do. It's what we need. And I don't know, have you noticed that kind of more recently as your following has grown? Have you kind of seen and are you welcoming it and trying to be positive and not kind of get drawn down the Facebook social media path of creating conflict and getting into fights in the comments?
Let's say like this. That's why I was like critically reflecting on this, that if I maybe need to be a bit more pushy in my content, to even be bolder of like what I'm standing for and what I think is right. And that doesn't make it right. That's just like, that is my opinion. And I think that's like the way forward. And then people can challenge me on this, and I invite everybody. And I also like to really try to understand people, because what we quite often do is we just put them into a corner and they say like, they're a denier or they're this. And we don't really give people like like just ask a question. That being said, like, for example, the post that I was talking about earlier about the wolves, for example, you read the comment section and immediately people start to be really aggressive and to insult and to pretend that you don't have resources even though you put them there, and that I just then don't even check the resources even though because like if you have to give all the resources, all the context in a LinkedIn post, like you can't put that much content. And if you put so much content, coming to the next rule, if you put tons of things into a post, people won't read it. Why? Because people nowadays, we got lazier. We need short snippets. We need to understand. We just fly over text. So if you have tons of text, nobody will read it anyways, and so it defies the purpose. So, but then you get attacked on that one, because you didn't provide like all the context or all the like different research that is out there. So I think for me, I definitely need to still be bolder in what I think is right, because sometimes I tend to be a people pleaser. So I think one of the reasons why I don't see that much yet of it is because maybe it is that way. And because I have this empathy and I can understand like how people are locked in a certain, because for example, if they have a farm right now, good luck. Like what else do you do if you're a farmer, let's say for like 30 years? It is challenging because you have all this heavy equipment and so one thing for me, take away, yes, I definitely still need to be bolder. And the second thing is that, how can I say that? One of the problems or one of the challenges is I'm currently trying to look into how I can do that more is like when you create content on whatever platform you choose, you always have to have, people always use the word strategy, but you need to have a bit of an understanding, again, who you want to talk to. So I have a really clear understanding who I want to talk to. So for example, for me, because this we said that with Rob, it's really important to share some really actionable things. I was like quite sure, okay, I want to talk with people that are interested in biodiversity, and I want to attract people that have like interest in eco-anxiety and that have this kind of right now that are at that stages where I was like a couple of years ago where I was like thinking about doing something, but I didn't know how, I didn't know where I can have the biggest impact. So basically this action gap. So I wanted to attract those people. But at the same time, you also need to have a bit of you can't, I think if you just like talk to those people, it is very, very tricky. And so you also need to provide and create like content that touches a bit on the bigger topics, So why do we have eco-anxiety? Like I need to talk about that. So for me, my eco-anxiety is not so much climate driven, but it's very much biodiversity driven. So that's why I really share a lot about this. And so the next thing that I have to develop in is like creating even more content that goes out of this echo chamber, And so that's why, for example, I create things like a biodiversity 101 guide, or why I create things like biodiversity stats, so that people that you and me, like here we have it like the entire time we know this kind of stats, if you tell people like, hey, did you know that 69% of the populations of animals,
it makes us fun at dinner parties, right?
you're like not again. But
this guy,
most people don't know, and so that's why I create also this kind of content that gets more people like just like touch points, generate these kind of touch points, because if you're not aware of that problem, and then you also can't change your own behavior and you can't take action. So raising awareness and going outside of this echo chamber is very important. And that's one of the things why I initially also started on LinkedIn, is because I saw the gap. There were people, experts, scientists, or action practitioners in terms of, for example, rewilding or in biodiversity, that were actually having quite some follower numbers. But as soon as you looked at the post, as soon as you looked also in the comment section, it were people that already knew about the importance, but it were rarely people that were like, oh, I didn't know that, or awesome, but what shifting baseline syndrome? Never heard about this. Thank you for sharing. But this needs to happen more. We were talking about communication, storytelling. So I try to use that a lot to get more people embarked on this nature mission. So
I've definitely been telling myself to not assume that people know what you know, and the stats thing's a good example. I've posted stuff, I think this feels like something that everyone would know, and then like you say, like the shifting baseline syndrome is a good example. I remember seeing you posting about that and thinking, oh, I felt like this was quite a common concept, and then in the comments like, everyone was like, wow, this makes so much sense. I thought that I need to take a lesson from that and not assume that everyone can reel off these stats and can but and I think just touching on that point around the comments and different perspectives, and I actually find it's a really nice maybe not the word, but I like the challenge of trying to find the middle ground when talking to whether it's a relative or a family friend or whatever it is, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
slightly different viewpoints, and it's like, well, there must be a connection somewhere.
Mm.
Trying to figure out where you can find that middle ground. And
Mm.
with nature, I find it a lot easier than with climate.
Yeah.
A lot of people do have some
Mm.
story or
Yeah.
connection
Yeah.
to nature in their past, and if you
Yeah.
can find that, you realize actually maybe we're not that different, and
Mm.
we can find a way to
Yeah.
to that middle ground.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very interesting that you said, because I still have a bit of a different approach. Right
Yeah,
now, I'm still at that level where I don't want to settle for middle ground, because I know that like nature won't,
yeah.
it is nice if we don't like push our, let's say, our relatives too hard that they have to go veggie and things like this, but nature will like sooner or later will set certain,
Oh yeah,
they
yeah,
won't know negotiate. So
yeah.
I'm
I
always like,
think
I'm not like middle ground, but what I'm a big fan of is like how to, you can't have the same message to always the same people. You need
I
to
think that's what I meant. Sorry, by middle ground. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't mean
yeah,
settle for the
yeah,
middle ground, because the middle
yeah,
ground will probably
yeah.
mean doom. I mean, yeah, I meant
Yeah,
find some common ground is probably
yeah,
is the
yeah,
right term, not middle
yeah.
ground. Yeah.
Yeah, common ground, or like just like trying to find like the right statistics. So for example, just this LinkedIn post that I did like a couple of weeks ago with a statistic sheet, I created like a sheet with all the most important like biodiversity stats, and I on purpose didn't take just like a, let's say, a statistics that resonates with nature lovers, but I took statistics that could resonate with different people, have like different reasons why they do certain things. So some people are driven by finances, so I put in finance numbers. Some people are driven by animals, I put in animal numbers.
Mm,
Some people are driven by just the connection of the family, so I put, for example, like tons of cancer medication, I think it was 70% or something, is based on nature components.
yeah.
So cancer is something, unfortunately, is a disease that is affecting a lot of
Mm,
families.
yeah.
So I always try to use arguments so that people see like every second breath that you take, so like nature is affecting our lives so much and so profound that we are all affected. And so I just like try to find like the right argument that resonates with the person, and that is hopefully touching exactly on the driver that they have. Yeah, but it's super challenging, especially if you talk to many people at the same time, like on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
Amazing. Right, I've got a few final questions before
Yeah.
we wrap up, which are a bit of fun
Yeah.
and questions that I'm gonna repeat in the
Mm-hmm.
new series to
Yeah.
guests.
Yeah.
So, the first one, which we'll see how this goes, but if you're anything like me, as a kind of entrepreneurial mind, someone that's interested in business, you've probably got a notepad or a virtual notepad somewhere with loads of different business
Mm-hmm.
ideas written
Mm-hmm.
down that you haven't acted on, or maybe they're
Yeah.
too crazy,
Yeah.
and they're there for a rainy day. So my first question is, have you got any of those business ideas that
Yeah.
you'd be happy to share?
Yeah.
Perhaps there's someone out there that you're happy for them to take
Ah,
it
yeah, for
and
sure.
run with. And that's
Yeah.
the ideal. This is what I'm
Yeah.
thinking: is
Yeah.
can we as a community get some more of these ideas
Yeah.
into? Can we bring them to fruition? Because we're only on our
Yeah.
own. We can't have 100 businesses, unfortunately. So, do you have any?
Yeah, no, 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 for sure, for sure. That's a very good question. Um, I mean, the one thing for the, like, in case I fail with Wildya, and not like, not failures and like I'm a failure, but just like if I don't manage, I have until, let's say, next year October to make Wildya work, because
Mhm.
sooner or later I need to pay the bills.
Yep, it's fair
uh,
enough.
so the first thing that's right now I'm working on, just like 5 to 10% of my time, is actually I do business consulting for
Mhm.
like biodiversity businesses and NGOs. So I help with marketing, with sales, with personal branding,
Nice.
LinkedIn content strategy, and so on, or like strategy websites. So basically things that are a bit like easier, like, this is like quite easy to make money with this and like to sustain myself. Whereas with an app that is touching on like so many different obstacles, as we already addressed,
It's a
that's just
moonshot.
like a
Yeah.
bigger, yeah, a big moonshot. So that's actively something where I'm just like, I have a buffer idea, let's say, that I'm just like slowly building up, just in case I need to really pay the bills. Because in the end, you always need to keep in mind, really great book by Simon Sinek, who wrote Infinite Game, is like, your idea as an ecopreneur is not to win the game, but to keep playing the game. So one of my major goals is like, how can I keep playing the game and can communicate about biodiversity and how important it is and have the active impact. And so I just need to have that a bit security in my mind because I need to pay bills like anybody else. So that's like what I concretely currently do. But one of the things that is on my notepad and that I initially was actually waving off if I should do Wildya or this was I was working in travel tech before. And one of the things why I left tourism was like tourism has like so many positive sides. Like there's like so many that we take away. We learn about cultures, we broaden our horizons. And I'm not talking about getting hammered in in Thailand in a, like full moon. I talk more about, let's say, the backpacking or like the like you travel to really gain experience. But let's say that side of traveling has like so many different positive effects, you know, like you also put nature, you put like money into nature because national parks are one of the reasons why we have still like pristine nature. However, tourism also has like a lot of negative impact. And so I was like, how cool would it be if we could travel digitally, but in such a way that it still feels more or less authentic? And I saw the first signals of that, for example, when there was COVID. There was a YouTube channel where they started to do live safaris on this YouTube channel. So basically, you could go on this live safari, and the cool thing was they had like 2 or 3 vehicles, so you could actually always see a bit of action, you know. So it was not like when you're sometimes in a safari vehicle, then there's also times where you just appreciate like the trees and bushes, but you don't see an elephant every time, you know. So but yeah, on that YouTube channel, for example, yes, you could see like an elephant and like lions, and then you jump to leopards and so on. So one of my ideas was like, hey, we have virtual reality, we have this kind of video content that we create like easier and easier, we have internet access in the most remote places nowadays. Can we create digital experience so that we gain the positive effects from tourism, but we don't have the negative effects? So can we create a financial stream that people, they still get something out of it? So imagine instead of going for Netflix on the couch, you actually travel to Botswana, you travel to Thailand, you travel to, I don't know, to the USA, to Patagonia, but you do it in a way where it's not 100% the experience. So you're not there, but you get some really digital crazy experiences that teach you about the local people, about the local ecosystems and so on. So having the positive effects, and you pay for that, and then the money is used to actually keep those places intact. So
like it.
That would be awesome, you know. So you still see the elephant, but you don't have to be there, so you don't create all the negative effects in terms of like getting there, construction, because there's more and more tourists, the food needs to be delivered in there, and so on, and so forth. So I was like, hey, if anybody wants to launch like a digital travel company that goes to the most remote places and engages people more, especially hopefully maybe especially in national parks and local people, indigenous, there's like so many cool angles that you can take. And again, really not that hard to test. So you can say, okay, you only go in for one country, you only go for really small prototype, it's literally like a camera crew or whatever. You can test that in a small setting. And so if anybody wants to grab it, invite me for a call, reach out to LinkedIn, more than happy to share.
I can imagine that being linked into Wildya somehow, and connecting that in kind of ways of getting out for people, you know, who can't get to these places, or who for me the idea of doing, I love travel and going to these places, but it does give you eco anxiety because you're like, should I be doing it, even if I do it in a low impact way? So I think that's got legs for sure. I love it. That's a great idea. The next question I've got on these repeating questions is books. Do you have any books that you're reading currently? They don't have to be nature related books, although if they are, then great. But anything that's on your bookshelf at the moment that you would gift to listeners, if you could give a virtual copy to the listeners, what would you go for?
I really enjoy reading. So it's tricky. Right now I'm reading, that's a good read for everybody that is a bit more interested really in nature. It's the social lives of animals. That's really cool because it's about animal behavior. Very nice. And it highlights also like some species like locusts, bees, bats, like some things that like we often don't talk about. So that is cool. If it comes to the most impactful let's say ecosystem, or like in general like about biodiversity in that area, I really found Cain's book great on Rewilding, the radical new science,
amazing book,
of conservation. That is really great because it's just like, it is still a bit sciencey, but it's very packaged in a way that most people, I think really everybody can understand it, and it's very visual. And so I really like that one because there were plenty of concepts that I was not aware of. And it's a very positive Rewilding. What I love about it is it's a very positive narrative. So it also doesn't shy away from all the messed up things that are going on, but Rewilding is very positive because you're bringing back something that has been extinct, or that is like just like living in the shadows, and you're bringing it back to, and hopefully nourish it back. And so really like that one from the nature perspective. In general, the book that I always recommend, it's a classic, it's called Atomic Habits. And that one, because in the end, we humans, we tend to think that we're always in charge of everything and so on, but our brain is just like, our brain is like really doing a lot of decisions for us. And so the book is a lot about like a lot of the things that I talked about on this podcast. So it's about like this really small improvements. Every day you get a bit better. It's about changing your habits, because habits, like, I didn't make nature priority in my daily life. So that's why I was unhappy. As soon as I put nature in what sort, if it's like walking in nature, if it's like consuming content, if it's connecting with like-minded, as soon as I put that and made it part of my habits, I became happier because I was actually finally doing the things that make me the most happy. So forming habits, understanding how people tick, this book is just like very, very powerful, and also written in a way that really everybody can literally like change their lives and change other people's lives, and also change like society. I think is a bigger is a bigger goal.
I've loved that book. I think there's another one, The Power of Habit, which is I read probably about 10 years ago. It probably didn't come out then, but it felt like a long time ago. And it was a similar thing. You kind of a light bulb moment of realizing that we are just creatures of habit. It's a cliche, but once you start realizing that and building routines and habits into your life, then things become a lot more straightforward, and you can start to make progress in a way where it can start to give you clarity in a messy world. So I love those suggestions. I'll put them in the comments below as well. And final question, and I'm actually going to break this into two parts for this.
Okay.
It's just a special one because of COP, which is so we're recording this in November, the week before COP 28. So it's called the billboard question. I like to end the podcast with it. So I'm going to give you two billboards today, a special treat. One to put around the world to the general public, so with a quote on it or something on it to captivate people's minds and imaginations and kind of get a message across. And then a second billboard to go at the entrance of COP 28 for the governments and the businesses that are going to be there next week. So you get a bonus billboard.
Let's start with COP because it's like obviously right now also on my mind, because I'm just like tired a bit of it. That often like it
do
does
a whole podcast on just
on COP. There's a great, for people, don't watch it when you have severe eco anxiety right now and you're in a dark place, and watch it with somebody that they can take care of you. But there's a really interesting series. It's called Extrapolations on Apple. I'm only at episode 3 right now, but basically what they do is they go and the decades, and they show you what happens in 37, 47, 57. And they have like some of these cops, and they just like they don't make jokes about it, but they basically show that again, we pushed the instead of 1.5 now we try to be below 2.3 or something like that, and even that gets kind of negotiated and things like this. So yeah, COP is always a bit like touchy for me, but what I would write is probably just to make the message very clear: courage and action. Courage, why? Because we need leaders, if we call them like that, to really have the courage to make bolder things. As we talked about, we don't have the time, we don't have the luxury of keep on talking, and so it needs a lot of courage. These things are hard. These are also not like, sometimes it's not popular, and sometimes you're ahead of your time and people don't know sometimes what is best for them. But in the long term, it is better for us to live a bit in discomfort now rather than it is huge discomfort later. And so courage is something that they need to speak up, to speak against also like a lot of greed and a lot of the interest that is like plaguing our world. And action, because yeah, it has been enough science, it has been enough data, we have enough like talks, we have enough goals, we have enough like blah blah blah. So we need action. So I think let's keep it really simple for them so that they have both. So courage and action. So that's for COP. And for people for people around the world in cities, one of the quote that I really like is from, I think his name is Bill McKibben, and he says that the planet is clearly out of its comfort zone, so we should better be out of ours. And it's something like that. I probably didn't hit exactly the right thing because I struggle to remember exactly, but it's something around that. And why that really struck with me, and whenever people ask me like what quote would you write, that is one of the first one, because it has such the great essence of like what we currently have to do. And it is indeed like the planet is like screaming for help. It sends us all the signals, and all the animals, all the species in this world, like the climate sends us like, I can't shout louder, it sends us all the signals. So it's clearly out of its comfort zone, and comfort zone for us in two ways. One, in the, let's say, in the way that when we are comfort zone, like we can't continue the status quo. And yes, our comfortable life brought us to where we are right now, like that we can order everything in a go, that we consume all the things and we just throw them away. So this status quo that can't exist, yes, that brings a lot of comfort, and that brings also like tons of security and like other maybe positive effects, but they just don't outweigh like all the negative effects that they bring. So like we need to get out of our comfort zone and be okay that for some time there will be some tougher decisions. Like it is sometimes harder to take the bike instead of the car. I loved eating, I'll be honest, I loved eating meat when I was younger. I really liked the taste of it. I didn't stop eating meat because I thought like it doesn't taste. I stopped because I couldn't deal with it anymore from an environmental perspective. And now I can't eat meat anymore because I don't like the taste anymore. So, but we need to get that discomfort a bit like from the negative perspective. We can't keep in our discomfort. And at the same time, in the positive effects, and maybe more empowering, what we don't talk enough about, where does growth really happen? Where was like, when you're listening to this, where were moments where you grow the most? Like out of your comfort zone. You don't grow your comfort zone by working the 9-to-5 job that is not stimulating you, that it's like, you do every day the same and you don't enjoy it. If you enjoy doing every day the same, a totally different story, but a lot of people don't. And so that is not where growth and like innovation and bold things and change is happening. Change is happening in a positive way, also like when you're out of the comfort zone. So I would love to empower people to, like get a bit like out of this comfort zone, because you will be happier because you see like what you're capable of. You will be happier because you see the changes around yourself. And so, yeah, get out of your comfort zone, because the world is clearly out of theirs. Like, I think it's a good.
I love that. That's a great quote. And yeah, I'll put all these quotes in the. I'll make sure that you got them right, and I'll put them in, in the comments.
I didn't come up with that quote, so please add on the.
I'm sure you've got many great quotes in you to come over the years. But yeah, thanks a lot, Oliver, for that chat. That was really enjoyable. We covered a lot of ground, various things. I'm sure we could talk for hours about various things. Like I said, we could probably do a whole episode on cop
Yeah.
alone. We should do this again sometime in the
Yeah.
future for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks.